Welcome to the leadership lunch for those that have been here before, Robert, and for welcome back. For those that are a little bit new, if you're first time, Brooke and Gene, thank you. Appreciate you guys coming here. So the way that this works, just so you guys know, is this is a discussion. This is not us talking, you listen. This is everybody engages and we learn from each other and we get key insights and we have a lot of fun. And you know, Shelby's graciously decided to join here for us and help us out, and has a fantastic discussion that she's going to lead. But as we have some discussions, if we ask questions and nobody's speaking up, just so everyone knows, I voluntold people and I'll call on people. So we want the discussion to be happening that way. And we're here every month. We do this the first Wednesday of every month, and different topics and different ideas and stuff. And wasn't sure how July is going to work because, a lot of people on vacation this week. We'll see how it goes. And Shelby, if we need a larger audience, we can redo this one and, on another date as well, get a little bit more. So I would real quick, I want to introduce Shelby. So fun story about Shelby. So I'm in the oil industry and I'm doing a lousy job that I don't like doing, right? And it's not a fun job. And so I'm interviewing with a lot of different companies, and I ended up with this one organization. And I interviewed for about 6 or 7 different kind of positions within this company. And one of the positions was in their organizational development training area. And that was a position that I didn't get. I ended up taking a position as an engineering manager. But what is interesting is that the person they did end up hiring for that position was Shelby. So she got the job that I wanted. And so that's how I ended up meeting her. And she did a great job with that organization. And it was a lot of fun to work with her and the opportunities that I had. There were no hard feelings over the fact that she got that job, because in the end, I had a job that was a good fit for me.
Yeah.
But that's how I first met Shelby, and we've maintained contact throughout the years and through different organizations and different positions and everything else. And she had called me up the other day and asked if we could talk a little bit about how I do this leadership lunch. And as through our discussion, I'm like, well, hey, you want to lead one? You want to host one for me? And she's like, yeah, that'd be cool. And so I was excited about it. We talked through her discussion and stuff. So I'm going to kind of hand it over to Shelby, let her lead the discussion. But again, at any point in time, please feel free, speak up. You can raise your hand if you're worried about speaking up out of turn. Don't worry about that with this small group. We'll be okay. Have a good time, enjoy yourselves, and we'll have a good conversation. So Shelby, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome, Ken. Thank you so much. And Ken, by the way, was a tremendous leader as we went. And I really enjoyed working with him, and I appreciate the opportunity to co-facilitate this session with him today. So as Ken mentioned, this is an interactive session. So I'm going to ask you to engage right away by typing a Y into the chat. If you've ever had this experience where you've been hitting your targets, you've been doing all the things, checking all the boxes, and yet something feels off deep down inside, like you are spinning your wheels, or you just feel stuck, or like you've hit a ceiling that you don't know what's going on. Anybody ever had that experience? Okay. Gene, frequently. Okay. Right. Well, thank you so much for playing. You are not alone, right? The Center of Creative Leadership says that 50 to 70% of leaders experience a career stall at least once in their career. So I'm curious for your input. Why do you think that is? Gene, I saw you mute.
I mean, I can only kind of guess a little bit without really thinking too much into it, that you get really good at what you're doing.
Yeah.
You've got everything fine-tuned. You've got your processes. You've got everything down. Your numbers are better than you ever thought they would be. Where do you go from there?
Yeah.
Where's the challenge?
Where's the challenge? 100%, Gene. Robert says corporate pyramid. Brooke says the human beings just have a tendency. And I think this is what Gene is saying too, for comfort, for complacency. And all of these are true. And the other truth is that what got us here won't get us there. And I think that really plays on what Jean is saying. We get to this place of complacency, we get to a place of comfort, and we don't really know what is next or how to get there. And so today our conversation is around transformation and how we can help move people to new levels of success and how we can move ourselves to more levels of success, not by doing more, but here's the trick. It's about becoming more. And that's what we're here for today. So I know Ken introduced me, but just briefly a little bit about me. I've been an executive coach and facilitator for 23 years. And I like to challenge leaders, entrepreneurs, professionals, to break through these perceived limits so that they can achieve new and extraordinary results. And again, what sets my work apart is the focus on transformation and not just performance. It's about how do we redefine success and then take some bold action to achieve it. So today we're just going to focus in on 3 key ideas that will help us break through that ceiling and lead with a bigger vision. And these ideas are starting with defining the concept of meta performance and really diving into and exploring, is it possible to actually go beyond high performance and break through that ceiling? The importance, number 2, the importance of creating a thrilling vision. And number 3, becoming more to achieve more. So at the end of this session, again, the expectation is that you're going to be able to create more for yourself as a leader and maybe even for your teams if you're leading teams. So again, Ken said this is going to be a highly interactive session. So it sounds like everybody's already committed to engagement. So thank you for participating. And speaking of engagement, I would love for you to type into the chat tool one word that describes the type of leader you would like to become. Catalyst. I love that, Robert. Say more about that, Robert. What does that mean to you, catalyst, being a catalyst?
Speed, inspiration, reducing barriers, fear.
I love that.
Lifting all boats.
Thank you.
Kind of rising tide.
Rising tide.
Rising tide rises all ships.
Yeah. And Brooke says clarifying. Tell me about that, Brooke.
Yeah, so I'll go back to scripture where there is no vision, people not flourish, they perish. And I think that there's such an opportunity, even in conversations like this, of considering what is ahead. And when I think about the word thrilling, I'm just like, oh, it actually can be infinitely more, again, scripture, immeasurably more than what you could think or ask. I think our greatest limitation is our imagination, but beginning those clarifying conversations, I think is where that begins.
So when you say clarifying, you're thinking bigger and more exciting and getting clearer. I love it. And I see Jean said innovative. We've got Jackie who says that she wants to be desired. I love that. The leader that everyone wants to work with. So thank you so much for sharing the type of leader that you want to become, because this is a very intentional phrasing. And notice that the question doesn't begin with, what is it that you want to do to become this leader? The phrasing starts with identity. And, most leadership development programs focus in on tactics or behaviors and teach us how to do more. But leaders who truly rise, the ones that shatter the ceilings and redefine what's possible, start with something more. And that is a way of being. And that is where we talk a little bit about this concept of meta performance. So meta performers, which we'll define shortly, is when we lead from this entirely different place, in this place of becoming and being. So let's take a look at what is the definition of meta performance and start to dig into this question. Is it possible? Is it actually possible to go beyond high performance? So we've already talked a little bit about how a lot of high performers hit these plateaus, and I'm sure you've seen like professional athletes or Oscar winners who lose momentum and slowly fade off into the horizon. So it's sort of this common thing where we expect that reaching the top feels like we've arrived, but sometimes it feels really empty. So let's explore a little bit about why that is. So according to an article written by Jason Jaggard, can you go beyond high performance? In the traditional hierarchy of performance, there are 3 levels. You've got your low performers, and your high performers. So let's start with low performance. What is your definition of low performance? Jean, what would you say is the definition of low performance?
Oh, there's so many different variations, right? Low performance for myself, lack of engagement.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so low performance really is just doing the bare minimum, lack of engagement, as Jean said, barely meeting expectations. You're not adding value or initiative. And low performers ask themselves, what's the least I can contribute without drawing negative attention, right? How about performance? Robert, I saw you come off mute. What's your definition of performance?
So I love to put math behind stuff when I can, when the math is easy. And one construct I'd like to use is a say-do ratio. Although the math actually might be a do-say ratio, but don't, crucify me over the numerator and denominator. But do we say what we do? Do we do what we say? Or in terms of expectations, set expectations, do your best to meet expectations, rinse, repeat.
Yeah.
And those expectations, that's a huge umbrella, right? What do we mean by expectations? But I mean, for now, I'll just leave it at that. Say-do ratio, and this metaphor of an expectation flywheel,
Yeah.
finding
I love that.
a rhythm in setting and meeting expectations.
Yeah, 100%. So, I couldn't have said it any better. Performers are consistently meeting expectations. They deliver results reliably, and they aim for just good. That ratio. They're balancing that ratio, as Robert is saying, which is not bad. And they're just asking what's required to be seen as successful here, and just staying on that flywheel, if you will. How about the definition of high performance? Jackie, what's your definition of high performance? Oh, no,
So Jackie, you're muted if you're trying to speak. We're not hearing you.
There we go. I had to get back to the right screen. Sorry.
No problem. Now we got you, Jackie.
Yeah. So high performance are adding value. They're change agents, bringing in improvements,
Yeah. Okay.
going above and beyond, not just doing what's required of their list of job duties,
Yeah.
but doing more.
Yeah. Thanks, Jackie. So high performers are exceeding expectations. They have focus. They have discipline. High performers are driven by goals or recognition, achievement. And the high performers ask, how can I be the best at what I do? And so oftentimes we think that's as high as we can go. And most companies think high performance is good enough. But again, the author of our article, Jason Jaggard, met with some leaders of a Fortune 100 company and asked them to describe their teams. And they said, we're a group of high performers. And so then the question becomes, well, what's the problem? So these leaders started to shift in their seats and they had no answer. And this is where meta performance comes in. So when we talk about the concept of meta performance, we're not talking about meta as in Facebook or metadata. Robert, I know your math whiz. We're talking about metamorphosis. And so this idea of transformation, like a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly. And this phrase was coined by Jason Jaggard as a transformational way of leading that is rooted in identity and vision and purpose. So meta performance is not just focused on achieving more, but it's focused on becoming more. And so meta performers ask, what am I capable of and who do I need to become in order to achieve extraordinary results. So with that definition, I'm curious, can you think of some meta performers that you've seen? Who might you define as a meta performer?
I thought of 2 examples.
Yeah.
Billie Jean King, the tennis player, and I don't know, she's got a new career post tennis, although I don't know exactly the right word to call it. I think one of her quotes is, "No one changes the world who isn't obsessed."
I love that.
So, I mean, there's a double negative there, which means, I guess, if you're gonna change the world, you must be obsessed with something.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty inspirational quote.
Mhm.
And the other person I think of is the cellist Yo-Yo Ma, who I think it's a true story. I don't think it's, some urban myth, where one of his fans said to him, "I would give my life to be able to play like you."
Mm.
And he said, "I did."
Yeah.
Um, so those are just 2, I think, I hope they qualify as meta performers, as as you envision them, as you're defining this term.
Well, let me ask you, what would, so I hear you this theme of obsession, of becoming like something that transcends anything that's ever been done in the past. So is that what I'm interpreting as your definition, and what makes those people meta performers?
Yeah, the word that, listening to you playing Yes and, the word frontier comes to mind. Understanding what is the frontier, having self-awareness and humility, like, am I behind the frontier? Am I off the frontier? Who's around me? Who's delusional? Who thinks they're on the frontier? I would politely disagree. What does it mean to move the frontier? Can we quantify it? Who can I bring along with me?
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of moving the frontier. And then, you know what? I really love that idea of who can I bring along with me? And that idea, again, going back to what you said earlier, Robert, rising all ships, right? The high tide, rising tide. So beautifully said. So yeah, I appreciate your contributions to, yeah, who is a meta performer, and would agree with your recommendation. So just to paint another picture, we've got Walt Disney, also classic meta performer, and take a look at his life to really, again, take what Robert said as his definition of meta performer and really continue that theme. And so Walt Disney, you may or may not know that in 1923, he declared bankruptcy at age of 21. So he could have just walked away, but instead what Walt did was he moved to Hollywood and chose reinvention over retreat. In 1928, he released Steamboat Willie, which was the first animated short with synchronized sound, and introduced the world to Mickey Mouse. And if we look at this through a meta performance lens, he didn't just make cartoons, he revolutionized storytelling through technology. In 1937, he, against very high industry skepticism, invested literally everything he had into producing the first full-length animated feature film, which was Snow White, which was a huge risk and a massive success. And the meta performance moment was that when others said it couldn't be done, he redefined the future of cinema. And when we think about his legacy, which was 1971, the opening of Walt Disney World, where Walt envisioned this world beyond movies, where people could step inside of stories, Walt Disney World became a reality. Actually, I don't know if you realize this, but this was after his death in 1966. But in the meta performance lens, he expanded beyond entertainment into urban planning, legacy planning, and really ultimately generational impact. And so, I mean, I would go back to Robert's examples of Billie Jean King and Yo-Yo Ma, and how they really have transformed and transcended that frontier of what people think excellence is, and redefined that. And that's really what a meta performer is. And so in order, though, to harness the meta performance way of being, and to expand that frontier, we have to start with a big vision and letting go of some of our defaults. So let's take a look at where we tend to find ourselves stuck. Oftentimes we get stuck in our same loops. Have any of you ever gotten stuck in sort of these mental narratives that keep you in the same place?
Yes.
Yes.
Sadly.
What keeps you stuck? What are some of those mental narratives?
I think when I am pursuing, whether it be a goal, a project, a job, etc., and it doesn't work out, similar to Ken's setup with Shelby coming in, I think that it's like, oh, that's the way it is. It's this language that I choose in my thinking of, well, it's not going to work out. So I get these old tapes replayed, and I can't quite break through that barrier. So if there's something I'm in pursuit of and it doesn't work out, I fall right back into the rut.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Brooke. Yeah. And have any of you ever thought about why that is? Why do we get stuck in these ruts and these old narratives?
Yeah. Gene, I saw you coming off mute there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
Well, my initial thought was I'm my own worst enemy.
Ah,
In
say
My-
what
more.
way?
My thoughts tend to be what holds me back
Yeah.
almost every time. That,
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that. Why would I go for that? I'm not qualified to do that.
Mm.
When in actuality, when I actually usually am forced to step outside of that safe zone, I do really well and
Yeah.
say, oh wow, I do know how to do this. And I think I can do it better. But initially I am my worst enemy. I hold myself back every time.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that personal story, Jean. And again, honestly, there's scientific reason for that. Our brains are simply wired for efficiency. We take the easiest route. And when we take that easy route, we tend to repeat old patterns. And so sometimes, we find ourselves living inside of what we've got on the screen, the default future. And so what happens is that our brain bases our reality on what was or what is. And so this is what creates these old experiences, these old assumptions, these old stories from our past. They shape the way that we think because it feels safe. We know that to be true from our past, but this is what keeps us, as Jean has pointed out, playing small. So instead, we have to turn our attention to creating a future that is based on what the possibilities could be in the way that Yo-Yo Ma has, in the way that Billie Jean King did, in the way that Walt Disney did. And this is what we call the generative future. So the generative future is a consciously created vision of what could be. It's using possibility to inform our present actions and perspectives. And, I think in simple terms, somebody said this to me the other day, it's sort of like dressing for the job that you want. So when we choose a different path, then we are not necessarily rewriting our past. We're just changing the way that we relate to our past by focusing on the possibilities. And so I can share an example of a woman that I've been coaching, and she came to our coaching session with some of these preconceived narratives. Like, I have never graduated college. She's been told all of her life that she's not leadership material. So if she continued to live into those beliefs from what was and what is, then that would be living into the default future. But she's chosen a different path. She set her sights on a very big possible vision, and she wants to be the chief of staff to the CEO of her company. And now, because she's drawing on this possibility of what could be, she is basically changing how she shows up today. She now steps into meetings and leads with confidence. She speaks up, she takes action. And so she no longer sees her past, quote unquote, supposed failures as failures or proof that she's not enough. She's seeing those instead as lessons and opportunities for improvement and development. And so again, focusing on the generative future doesn't change our past, but it helps us move beyond those past narratives by focusing on what will be, and that can shape our actions today. Can you think of another example of maybe when you've focused on what is possible and how that's informed and shaped your behaviors in today's present environment? Thanks, Jackie. Appreciate you being here. Robert says there's a great movie from John Cusack. Tell us about it, Robert.
So it's a cult classic from around 1985.
I know that one. That was
Better Off Dead.
Better Off Dead, where he's skiing down
Better Off
the
Dead.
hill. Go that way really fast. Yeah, exactly. So if you set your sights on the outcome, the goal, the big vision, the dream, then you can get there, and that will shape the way that you show up today. So let's take a look at 3 key concepts that will help us get to this bigger vision, right? Because that's where we're trying to go. And so 3 key concepts, we have to start with vision. Vision is at the foundation of everything that we do. As leaders, oftentimes we jump in and we dive into action. What do I have to do differently instead of really focusing on vision? But without having a clear destination, we can't plot the best strategy or path to get to the destination. And so that vision is really very important. And then the second piece of getting to that big goal is mindset. Robert, what's your definition of mindset?
I use metaphors a lot. So I will use metaphors as positive role models, asking what are we right now? What should we be imitating? And if I'm in a dysfunctional place, I'll ask, what are the metaphors for bad teamwork? Do we resemble a traffic jam, a game of whack-a-mole, a cat chasing a laser pointer? So yeah, I think a metaphor can be a fun, playful, but still inspirational, positive role model and negative role model for characterizing what are we right now.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. Yeah, mindset ultimately are these thoughts and these beliefs that shape our actions, and they can either help us to achieve that vision and move us forward, or they can hold us back. All right, as Robert so eloquently put with his metaphor, right? So the key is that we have to start to rewire our thinking and focus more in on what is going to move us forward toward that vision and overcome those past narratives that are no longer serving us. And then finally, we have the strategy piece. And the strategy really are just the actions that we take to get to the end destination. But really, the biggest thing is that thrilling vision, because it's this thrilling and exciting vision that is ultimately going to be worth the cost of the transformation that is necessary to achieve it. So having a vision that is exciting and compelling is going to be what's driving us forward towards success. And ultimately, again, moving beyond that frontier to something that's new, different, and more exciting. So let's take a stab at creating a bold vision. So leading from vision is really, again, an important place to start. So, but not just any vision, it has to be a vision that is specific. So what is the specific goal that we are trying to achieve? Something that's measurable. So we have to be able to measure when we've actually achieved that vision. And it should be also time bound. So there should be a deadline. And so notice that, I don't know, have any of you ever learned the SMART acronym? Yeah, Brooke is shaking her head. So there's usually an A and an R in there that stand for attainable and realistic. But remember, we're trying to push the frontier here. So we've just got specific, measurable, and a deadline. So what I'd like to do, and we'll dive into this as we share this, we're going to continue to expand this vision. But I'd like to give you a few minutes to just craft your own vision that meets the specific, measurable, timeline, deadline driven goal. So I'm going to give you, let's say, about 3 minutes to write down a personal vision for yourself that, or a professional vision that is bold, that excites you, that meets these specific measurable deadline requirements. So you've got 3 minutes, and then I will have one of you share your vision. Got a couple minutes left. You got about a minute left. Thanks, Jean. We're just writing a vision for ourselves that is either personal or professional that meets these requirements, that it's specific, it's measurable, and that there's a deadline. You've got about, I know it's 30 seconds. Sorry that your time cut short.
Well,
We'll continue.
nice.
No worries.
Somebody apparently wanted to look at my roof and I had to tell them no.
Always perfect timing.
The the bad part of working remotely,
Yes,
but if I don't answer the door, my dog goes crazy, so.
I feel your pain.
Okay. You're
All right.
overachieving, Gene. You can get it done in 30 seconds.
Yeah. I'll give you about 10 more seconds. Okay. So let's continue on, because what ultimately happens sometimes is that we don't always start with a perfectly polished or crystal clear vision. We, in my coaching program, we lovingly call this an SFD, which is what we call a stinky first draft, or if you're feeling bold and brazen, you might replace stinky with another 4-letter S word. But our SFD is probably sometimes too broad, or it might cover too many things at once, or it may not be measurable or time bound. So let's try and dig into this a little bit. What I'd like to do is get one person to volunteer to share their SFD, their vision for themselves. And the rest of us, what I'd like you to do is ask that individual questions that will help them narrow down and get as specific as possible, get their goal as clear and specific as possible. So who would like to volunteer to share their vision?
Free chance to get some free coaching.
Right.
I'll pass up on it.
Brooke, I saw you come off mute. What is your vision for yourself?
I didn't want to take up the time, Shelby, but yes. So what I wrote down, and I'm looking at my notes here, I would love to onboard 2 churches by September 1st for the purpose of serving them with vision clarity of discipleship, the calling, training for every believer, and to increase alignment for their church team with culture building tools.
Wow. Okay. So that was very specific. You wanted to onboard 2 churches by, what was your deadline?
September 1st.
September 1st.
Mhm.
Okay. And you have a variety of different reasons why you want to bring those on board those 2 churches. So does that meet? I'm going to ask Robert and Jean, is that specific?
Yes,
Yes. Is it measurable?
very.
Yeah.
I hesitate because I don't know whether Brooke is her portfolio, the services that she's offering. There could be
Exactly.
small, medium, large. And I think of the
What,
phrase meet your customer where they are. And so maybe Brooke has got a crawl, walk, run approach. Maybe it's a big bang. I'm not sure. So I think there is more granularity that's not very far away.
Shelby,
What
here's
would you
my
ask
observation.
about-
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Ken.
I say, so my observation on this is that it's very task specific. It's not
Hmm.
like this big broad about her. Like, what does she want to become? Like, does she want to become like the premier, pastor that elevates every organization around her or something? It's my observation. You can tell me if you agree or disagree. It seems kind of narrow and specific and small. I'm thinking, well, let's make this big. Let's explode this.
I love that idea of exploding it. Yeah. So, and Robert, you said it could be more granular too. So what would you think? Let's play around with this a little bit, Robert. What would you ask Brooke, or what do you think could be more granular or more clear for you?
Word that's coming to mind is staggered, or if there's anything phased. Gold, silver, platinum packages. What does tiering mean if it applies? That's all
Yeah.
that's coming to mind.
Yeah. And maybe to your point, Robert, what does onboarded mean?
that's my question.
Yeah.
What are
So
we onboarding to? What is the end result for the people that are being onboarded? What's their gain?
mhm. So Brooke, what would you say? What does onboarding mean to you?
Yes, I love these questions because one of the things that came to mind as Ken was sharing and then followed by Jean and Robert was like, okay, this is a vision. Is it a meta vision? And second to that, is it thrilling? So this idea of premier, like I would love to have 2 leading churches in America. We serve all faith denominations, all tribes of beliefs. And I would love to reach a church who is hungry for discipleship, meaning they don't want to just bring people to their building. They want to clarify the calling of every believer who has said yes to Jesus to send them out as missional practitioners where they live, work, and play. So in this onboarding, there is a yes from the senior pastor, like this resounding, enthusiastic yes. The senior team is on board. We would start with this clarifying and aligning of coaching because what I have found is that you can get into all of this discipleship playbook work with churches, but sometimes the teams either aren't healthy or aligned. So, in my perfect vision, that would be thrilling. It would be 2 churches anywhere in North America that would be on the average size of about 1,500 to 2,000 people. We've got all buy-in from all senior leaders, and that we're leaning in, starting with our coaching practices for healthy culture building tools and alignment. Then we begin the vision work through creating, we have a playbook, a 6-step playbook that occurs over a period of 10 months, where we train churches in their local context that is innovation to what their local expression is. So being able to pull that out and then watching them actively answer the question, if our church did not exist, what would it do to impact the community? Would anybody know? Like, I want them to articulate that question very clearly, holistically, and in unity.
Great, Brooke. Thank you so much. So when we talk about, I heard you say that there's a 10-month playbook that comes into play. So when you say you want to have them onboarded by September, and to Robert's point, is there a phased approach? It sounds like there is. And so, and it sounds like as you start to think through this vision a little bit more in depth and more in detail, it sounds like maybe just identifying the churches and finding that right sweet spot fit wherever they live, but the size and the mission of the church is what you're looking to fulfill and get them bought into this 10-month phased approach. Is that what you're talking about when you talk about onboarding? And
Yes, exactly.
And then moving them through that process, the playbook over the course of 10 months, it sounds like.
Yes. So by September 1, there is a yes and an amen to a fully signed contract. And we are setting dates following that September 1 date to kick everything off. The team is assembled and we begin the process.
Okay, great. So thank you for being the example. But I think that really just points out, like, when we start to put our vision to paper, well, first of all, how does that feel to put our vision on paper?
Like writing with my opposite hand. It's not comfortable or known. It's a little foreign.
Okay. We don't often sit down and actually write down these visions, but the research shows when we do write down our visions that we're much, much more likely to achieve them. But getting down to that level of specificity, what do we mean by onboarding? When we say, we want to onboard 2 churches, what kind of churches are we talking about? What size of churches? What's their mission? So all of those things are questions that we need to ask ourselves when we're digging into that vision. And why are those details important? Jean, why are the details important?
Well, the details are like the baby steps, the mini goals to achieve the big goal, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
so we have to get that level of clarity so that we know when we've actually achieved the goal. And yes, Jean, to your point, we can start to then visualize how we might actually move there.
and start to actually measure the achievements to get to the big goal.
Yeah.
One of the questions that my kids, they would get exasperated every time I'd ask this question. I'd ask the question, well, what does that look like? And they would get a little frustrated, but if you can't answer that question of what does it look like, then to Shelby's point, how do you know when you've got there? If you can't describe it to that level of granularity, to just describe what it looks like, take a picture of it or a video of it, well, we're not done clarifying yet.
Yeah, exactly. All right, are we ready to play some more? Because this is just the beginning, and where we're really going is how do we make our vision even bigger? So the reality is that most of us vastly underestimate what we are capable of. So when we talk about this level of transformative leadership and going beyond high performance, and start to think about meta performance, we can use a tool called our intuitive fence to expand our vision. So if we look at this circle, in the very center of the circle, this dot represents what you know to be possible. These are things you've already done. Maybe you've seen other people like you do. You know that these things are possible. I don't know, Robert, what's one thing that you know is possible that you know how to do? It could be anything.
I can talk to PMI chapters.
I love it. Been there, done that. How about you, Jean? What's one thing that you know that you can do?
Can lead people.
All right, I love it. Brooke, how about you? What's one thing you know you can do?
Hey, I can brush my teeth. Like I've got it nailed.
Thank goodness.
I love that.
We love you for that. Thank you. All right, so these are anything: swim, walk, run, ride a bike. Anything that we know is possible is at the center of the circle, but you can see the rest of the circle. There's a lot of room to play. And as we move to the outer perimeter of the circle, then we start to embark into this space or venture into this space where things feel less possible. Are you going to wake up tomorrow morning and win the lottery? Maybe. It's not impossible, but it feels a little bit less possible. And what stands between us and this space of impossible is what we call the intuitive fence. The intuitive fence is that outer perimeter of the circle. Remember back when we were talking about the generative and the default future, that's where our brains like to settle into the comfort zone and stop us from thinking bigger, because again, we're basing everything that we know on what was or what is. So what we like to do in meta performance is to expand our vision outside of our intuitive fence into what feels impossible. Why in the world why would we do that? Why would we want to shoot for something that feels impossible?
Legacy.
Okay. Why else? What do you think, Brooke?
I like Robert's word of legacy. It just makes me think that the design of the human, regardless of theological beliefs, that we are simply made for more, like impact in the world. And so I think about how much more that is latent as asleep inside of us because we either, to Jean's point, we don't allow ourselves, we're our own worst critics. Someone told us we couldn't. So I think that there's this expansion of possibility to impossibility that awakens us inside.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I mean, the reality is, if we allow ourselves to go there, if we allow ourselves to think bigger, we can ultimately achieve more and leave that legacy that we may want to leave. And I think about a woman that I've been working with that is an executive director of a nonprofit. And when we started our conversation, her biggest goal that she could possibly imagine was to raise $500,000 for her nonprofit this year. So we played with this tool called the intuitive fence because the goal is to achieve something that feels impossible. So I asked her, on a scale of 1 to 10, if 1 is what feels most possible and 10 feels like it's completely impossible, where does 500,000 fall? And 500,000 really was very much inside of her intuitive fence. So by the end of our conversation, her goal for this year is to raise $5 million for her nonprofit. So on a scale of 1 to 10, that is a 10 for her in terms of feeling impossible. And it's thrilling and exciting because remember, we have to transform ourselves to achieve this goal. So we need something that is going to compel us forward. And right now, we are like 2 months into our coaching engagement. She's raised $1.1 million for her nonprofit. So I use that as an example because when we start to think bigger and when we start to shoot for something that feels really impossible, we achieve more. So Brooke, I want to ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how thrilling and impossible is your goal?
I would say it is inside my fence in the way that you teed it up, Shelby. It's probably I'm flirting with that line a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, I definitely think that it could be on the more possible side.
Okay. So what would make it impossible for you?
Onboarding, let's say 5 churches by September 1st. That feels impossible.
Okay. All right. So that's the goal. The vision, 5 churches with a heck yes and an amen, I think you said.
Hallelujah.
All
Yes.
right. And we've got the size, specificity. So we have the detail, the deadline. We know when it's going to happen. Scale is an interesting variable. Robert, what other variables can we play with?
Got to come back to me on that. Wasn't prepared for the question.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe geography.
Okay, say more.
Brooke might be US centric. Oh, you said North America. And you limited yourself to churches.
Mm.
I don't know if church, faith, religion has a distinct hard boundary, or if the boundary of that is kind of squishy. Again, you might expand your pool.
Yeah.
I love that, Robert. And it is squishy. Actually, it's very gray. And so certainly nonprofit work and even for-profit work is a possibility as well. A little bit of a different target when we think about specifically disciple making. But there could be a realm of possibility, maybe even impossibility of working with faith-based nonprofits, for example, of what that looks like as they are leaning in to their mission and their mission clarity. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thanks. So I appreciate that. And Robert, thanks for pointing out that there are different levers that we can use to expand our vision outside of that intuitive fence into the realm of impossibility. Maybe it's time. Maybe the time trajectory is August 1st instead of September 1st. Maybe it's expanding that pool of possibility, like Robert pointed out. Maybe we scale it at a different level. So we've gone from 2 to 5. So there's a lot of different levers that you can play with when you're pushing your vision outside of that intuitive fence. But the idea is to find that space that feels both really exciting, thrilling, and impossible.
There's another playful phrase that's coming to mind. You can take and this is kind of a Bruce Springsteen, not Billy Joel, Bon Jovi. You can take, no, in fact, it's a Bon Jovi lyric. You can take the boy from his home, but not, wait, anyone help me with the song lyric? It's a duet with Jennifer Nettles. It's a country song, but not a boy from his home. Right, you can take Bruce Springsteen out of New Jersey, but you can't take New Jersey out of Bruce Springsteen.
Exactly.
So can you apply that can you invert that to the word church, where, right, there's certain activities in a church, but maybe there's church and faith-based habits in what on the surface, it's not a church. The church is on the inside. So there are subtle culture traits that feel faith-based, that feel churchy, but the shell is absolutely not a church. So I think there's something to play with there as well, going back to the Bon Jovi, Jennifer Nettles song lyric, to take a boy from his home.
Thank you, Robert. That's fun to play with and actually think about.
Yeah. And I appreciate you playing, Brooke, the game and everyone for contributing, because again, there can be so many levers. And again, our limiting thinking, our intuitive fence stops us from conceiving of what those might be. But it's a fun thing to play with. And so when you are creating your visions, I ask you to think of, on that scale of 1 to 10, what makes your vision thrilling and impossible, and how can you pull different levers to move your vision outside of that intuitive fence. And then once we move our vision outside of that intuitive fence, then we can talk a little bit about how do we go about achieving that vision as leaders. So again, from a meta performance perspective, let's take a look at that. Thank you, Brooke. I'm sorry, I've got to go. Totally understand. But yeah, so just as we bring our session today to a close, most of the time as leaders, we now say, okay, I've got this vision. What do I have to do to get there? And then when I start doing these actions, I will have the success that I want so that I can be the leader. But remember back to the beginning when I asked you, what kind of leader do you want to become? Meta performers, thank you, Ken. Meta performers start with, who do I have to become in order to achieve that vision? And how would that person show up, and what would they do in order to have the success that we want? And so it's flipping that script in the way that we approach achieving that meta performance vision that's outside of our intuitive fence by starting with a way of being. Who do I have to become? Who do I have to step into being to achieve that goal? So to wrap us all up, I love this quote by leadership guru John Maxwell, who says, "We cannot become what we need to be by remaining what we are." So I would love to know from those of you, Jean and Robert, what's one thing that you're taking away from this session that you might do differently moving forward?
I feel I need to untether myself from the habits and patterns of a typical public speaker and a typical author.
And what would that look like for you, Robert?
Finding new role models.
Mm.
Referring to this, what's on the slide right now, I'm a freshman when it comes to John Maxwell. I know some of his stuff and I love it, but I'm not an upperclassman when it comes to all of his wisdom. But yeah, just blue sky thinking, what could I look like 5 years from now? That makes it easy to accomplish, and not just easy for me, easy for my readers, etc., my community. What does easy look like? How can I make this easy for them? Second nature, muscle memory, slam dunk. And then identifying the small interim wins to understand how straight line is the path, or how much dodging, how much bobbing and weaving what I need to do. And when do I accept losses or rejections, bouncing off the wall, back to the Lane Meyer Better Off Dead quote, where is something in my way? Where do I have to turn?
Yeah.
Even temporary setbacks. I'm going through a temporary setback right now, and I take it in stride. Having a thick skin, not a thick skull.
Robert, if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
I like that.
Right. I haven't seen that whole movie. Just YouTube is popping up that movie.
Right.
And I was just joking with someone, what if we had a professional kickball league? I was told, or dodgeball league. I was told there is one. And then I was also introduced to the combination of a adult game of kickball combined with slip and slides. Mind blown.
Right? But hey, when you have a meta performance mindset, sky's the limit, right?
I'm pretty sure that would wind me up in the hospital.
I'm with you, Jean.
A
I'm with you.
broken bone here or there.
Might be
And
worth it though.
It
it's
might
another,
be.
it's another, and I'm looking at the clock. There's another, we're kind of recalling my favorite definition of the word creativity, the combination of two or more things that, like an hour ago, we didn't know were related. Slip and slide and
Yes.
kickball.
Awesome. Well, I am also looking at the time, and I just want to say thank you all for being here today. I appreciate you, Ken, for inviting me into your space and for encouraging the conversation. And for Jean and Robert, thank you so much for being here on a 4th of July holiday week. It's great to get to know you. And if you're interested in knowing more about me or the work I do, feel free to drop your email into the chat tool. I'd be happy to connect with you, or you can use any of the QR codes on the screen to connect. So I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being included.
All right, thanks, Gene. And the next one we're going to do is the 6th of August. So again, it's the first Wednesday of every month at noon Central.
All
Don't
right.
have a topic yet. So if there's anything that resonates with you or something that you'd like to discuss or something you'd like to talk about, please let me know. And I'm more than happy to facilitate it around those good ideas.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Gene.
everyone. Have a good rest of your week. It's so great to meet you.
You
Too.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take
Bye.
care.
Thank you, Ken. I hate to do this, but I've got to